Hey everybody, how's it going? Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we've got Chris Tisdale from CoinTable, very common face on the channel. But anyways, we're going to be going over a topic that we've both decided is quite important, and that's to discuss when you should grade your coins. And it sounds like a confusing kind of topic at first. When should you grade your coins? Maybe not that clear, but what we're talking about is the threshold at which point it is a good idea to grade your coins. Obviously, there's significant cost in sending coins in, and there can be huge benefits from getting the right grades. And there's also, it's very easy to lose quite a bit of money. I think that there's different categories, whether that might be submitting a cherry picker error, submitting world coins, US coins, very rare individual coins, or are we doing a bulk batch where you're playing it as a strategy and a few are going to come out on top or not? How much experience do you need to have before you can recognize when a modern coin is a true specialty and totally going to be worth putting in the $20 to try to get the very finest known of that coin? So there's so much to cover here. Sorry for the long intro, but good to see you, Chris.
Yep, absolutely. Good to see you, and thanks for having me.
So, I mean, we'll start with kind of your expertise, but I think I'll start by telling the story. There's somebody who really nice guy. He contacted me. He said, I have something. I think it's going to be a really good business idea. I don't want to tell people about what I have because it could make a huge market move disruption. And I emailed him back. He wasn't comfortable telling me what the coins were. I was like, hey, I think if this is a sealed roll of 1800s coins, they probably didn't even exist in sealed rolls, or like 1920s half dollars. I think that this is going to be a winner. We're going to do this together. And I wrote in the email, if it's Lincoln Memorial cents that are the older ones, that's not going to be worth it unless you have a really special eye. And I think the person ended up going for it, and there weren't any coins that were more expensive than the grading fees. But at the same time, I think that they took it really well. And I think that they're going to have a good future going forward with the process of grading coins and making it kind of a side hobby. They can earn some money, that sort of thing. But I just think that there's, before other people go out on a limb and might miss big, we should probably discuss what some of those thresholds are. At what point are we going to grade coins, especially we'll start with the US modern coins.
Yeah, I think that's great, and just that was insightful, what you just said, because I'm double-sided on the issue. Number one, it's going to boil down to the person. How hard are they willing to work? How committed are they? And what are their goals and what is their objective? Because I will, if any of you out there that have followed me at all, you'll hear me say that failure is literally what builds the many failures is what will lead you to success. And so this guy that you're talking about and referencing, I love the fact that he took it well, because to me, even though he probably just gave however much money it was to the graders, that like literally just paid them, and that was that. And now he's just got coins in holders that are still worth what they were before. If he took it good, then that guy's probably going to win, because all he's done is figured out one thing not to do, and he won't do it again. And I believe that's an incredibly important part of being successful. So good for that guy. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is I love it when someone will take action, when they're willing to take action and they're willing to live with the results. The way I did it, Christian, was what I would highly recommend anyone do, and that's train your eye first. I see so many people who they watch me unbox let's say a bulk batch of proofs from the graders, and they think, oh, I've got a bunch of proof sets, I'm just going to send them all in. Well, that's probably not going to be a winning strategy. It could, but it's probably not going to be. And you've seen it yourself on your end with the guy that emailed you, where you can't just blindly send in coins. Like, you have to develop your eye. And the only way to develop your eye, in my opinion, is to look at the coins that you're thinking about sending in. So for me personally, on my journey, the very first batch of coins I ever sent was a batch of 1964 Kennedys. They were all accented hair, and I sent them all to bulk. But by that time, I had read enough and looked at enough pictures and learned enough where I was looking at these coins individually under light, and the ones that had heavy hairlines, I knew 64, 65 max, and so I put those in my reject pile. I only sent coins that I wanted to grade 67 or better. And at that time, you know, you could have a hairline, a very minor hairline here or there, but for the most part, it needed to be a clean, spot-free, hairline-free coin in order to grade 67 or better. And so, and most of them just aren't. You know, you can take them right out of the cellophane, and most of them are just not that good. And so develop your eye and learn the market and then grade. And I just see so many people doing it backwards. They just think, I'm just going to grade all these coins and make all this money. And that's okay if you're willing to live with the consequences of, you know, the learning curve of just paying the grading company until you figure out what to send and what not to.
I totally agree. I mean, that was even me. I submitted a bunch of coins and I thought, you know, this is a spotless proof coin, and it came back, you know, proof 68. Thankfully, over the whole deal there, I did identify a few. I identified one proof 70 Eisenhower dollar. It probably was more of a proof 69 deep cam. You know, regardless, it got the 70 deep cam and it brought me out of the deal, but it's definitely a learning moment. You know, with the proof coins, you're really looking for the frost. You know, for a lot of the more modern stuff, you know, when I know you do a lot with Franklin's, that's a little bit different, but couldn't agree more about learning these things. Now, where are we going to go and learn that? That's really the question, the follow up, because not everybody has access to, you know, losing $3,000 or $4,000 in grading fees, or, you know, seeing 250 proof sets in front of them as they come out of the cellophane. Like, where, you know, I'm sure there's online, you know, if somebody watches your channel, they'll probably understand how to do that a lot better. But like, where are we going to get that experience and train that eye, kind of briefly? Because I don't want that to be like the whole focus of the video, but any color there would be appreciated.
So honestly, what I did, and I can only answer this quickly if I think about my own experience. What I did is I went to my local coin shops. I just kept hearing, this was back like right on the cusp of the internet, where, you know, now there's all this great insight and there's all this great information online about coins. 10 years ago when I started, I would walk into a coin shop super excited and I would ask a question and they would literally be like, hey, you need to leave. Like, so in other words, what I'm saying, you guys, everyone that has access to the internet and all this information, use it because you're lucky. And I hope you don't take it for granted, because it hasn't always been this way. And because of guys like Christian and some other guys, we're seeing the tide turn, and it's very exciting, and I'm happy about that. Getting back to your question, what I did is I went to my local coin shops and I found one coin shop in particular where he finally got to the point where he was comfortable just walking by. I would walk in and he would say, hey, what's going on? How are you? And he literally would just walk over, take his junk silver bin and drop it on the counter, and then just turn around and walk away, because he knew that I just wanted to look at his coins. And he would literally let me go in there. I'd spend 4, 5, 6 hours on certain days going in there and just looking at coins. And those were all business struck coins. This is one of those dealers where if silver comes in through the door, like I'm talking 90% silver coins, even if they're BU uncirculated, he just throws it in his silver bin and he just calls it all junk silver. And so, you know, I would start looking at those coins, and I was able to find a handful of varieties and at a loop. You know, I didn't know at the time whether it was like an FS 101 or some minor variety or anything like that. I just like, oh, that's got double dyed on the reverse, or that's got double dyed on the obverse. And so I would buy those coins, and I would also buy the coins that I thought, that looks uncirculated to me, and it looks like it might even be in high grade. And then I would take them home. I would look at them under my own light, a little bit closer. And I did this for quite some time, like over a year, where I was just looking at as many coins as I could possibly look at. And so that goes back to your question of like, you know, a lot of the guys out there, I know you guys don't have 250 proofs that you can just go buy and then look at, and that's okay. Go to coin shows, go to coin shops. It might take you 1 or 2 or 3 trips for these guys who own the shops to feel comfortable enough letting you just look at their coins, but build that relationship and go and just look at as many coins as you can. The other thing that I personally did, there's 2 other things that come to mind. Number one, Heritage Auctions has really, really, really good photos, in my opinion. And so how I learned how to grade Mint State Morgan dollars, myself personally, is I went to Heritage and I literally just looked at Morgan dollars. I went to the archives, the auction archives, and I would pull up the photo and specifically not look at the top where the grade was, and I would just focus on looking at the coin front and back, and I would throw out like, I think that's an MS64, and then I'd look at the grade, and I just that's how I learned how to grade uncirculated Morgan dollars. And then with the proofs, I remember it clicked for me on the proofs when I got the copy of the ANA's standards for grading US coins. There was a section in there specifically about proofs that I read, and it was dead on the money. It's changed a lot since then, and there's been a lot of like, it ebbs and flows with the graders and what they call a 7 versus an 8 or versus a 9. But that's what I did. So that's how I did it. And I would just recommend everybody out there, just put in the effort before you throw your money away. And unless you want to, unless you're okay with the fact that you're probably going to, or that you very likely could lose money in that learning process.
I think that's really smart. And now, as you know, because yeah, that's pretty much how I would approach it. And you're the one who's really done it and had success, like you said, having some small failures, but in the long term, having major success. Now, as we pivot maybe a little bit away from like grading a really shiny penny in our pocket change, I guess we'll start with errors, cherry picker errors. Less for, does somebody know that they have an error, but a lot of them, they'll be maybe a $50 to $100 coin, but the grading fees, I mean, it's an $18 additional charge at a place like PCGS. Maybe ANAX is a little bit lower and still slightly respected, but I kind of, in my mind, I want to go with PCGS, maybe NGC.
I would too. I would highly suggest that to everybody out there. NGC or PCGS, just do it.
And do you think that, on a coin that you think you can sell, you should probably be doing the math, but on a $100 coin or on a $70 coin, is it worth getting the premium? Are buyers that much more excited about having the label telling them that it's a, repunched mint mark, where it's worth putting it through the grading process and paying, $40, $50 a coin to get them graded? Or how do you see that in terms of just specifically the cherry picker errors?
Yeah, that's a good point too, because it's important to highlight that, you guys, it really is costing $50 a coin when you get to, like, let's say, for example, you throw out repunch mint mark. So I'm just going to say the 1964 Kennedy, it's got a handful of known RPMs, and to grade that coin, you're going to pay 20 or 25 bucks just to grade it. And then you're going to pay 18 or 22 or whatever it is on top of that for the variety attribution. And there's a couple of things to be aware of. Number one, just because you think it's the RPM FS such and such doesn't mean they're going to agree with you. And it doesn't really matter who's right. It matters what gets put on that label. And so that's something to be aware of. The other thing to be aware of is, like you said, the math. So what I personally do is I look at, well, what does this coin sell for so I first look at the coin and establish, I think it is a 65. Okay, it's an MS65, let's say. And then I look at the math. What does this coin sell for when it has that on the label? And if it sells for $100, let's say, and I know that I'm gonna have to spend 50 to get it graded, well, I personally, there maybe was a time when I would have done that, but so in other words, I would maybe do I would get behind something like that if you're doing it for the experience. But, to spend $50 on a coin just so that you can sell it for 100 after eBay fees and maybe not eBay fees, maybe just shipping fees. But I personally would rather just take that same coin and sell it to someone for 20 bucks. Maybe it's a $12 silver coin. If I think there's any chance at all that it comes back anything less than a 65, that's another reason where I'm like, nah, it's not worth grading. So there's so many variables and so many factors that go into this. I think the biggest highlight would be to figure out the numbers. In other words, what does it sell for in a 65? What is, is it a possible 66, which in this case, would it be a top pop? And in certain cases could be worth thousands of dollars if it becomes a registry coin. I mean, so there's so many variables and factors there that I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. I don't think it's black and white. I think you just kind of have to find your middle ground. And my biggest advice would be to put in the time, train your eye, and learn the market enough to where you're giving it respect, because it really sucks to just flush a lot of money down the toilet when it comes to grading. And what I mean by that is, like, when you send a coin to grade and you get it back and you got the same coin, it's just now in a plastic holder, and you just spent 50 bucks to get it in that plastic holder, but it's not going to sell for even 1 penny more than what you paid for it, or what it would raw. So I think it just boils down to respecting the game enough to developing your eye, and then like you said, learning the market enough to do the math.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good point because I think the closing, I mean, I'm going to make a brief aside here and then we'll wrap up with some of the more classic US coins. And I think maybe we'll briefly touch on crackout, but not spend too much time on that because I think that's a totally separate video. But with world coins, my experience has been generally world coins don't end up in plastic, but a lot of people like having their coins in graded and often on some very rare items. It can just be a great way to quantify what you have. Now you still have to take into account the math, but there is, and I mentioned it on a video that, we just, for the viewers out there, we're filming 2 videos at a time right now. Anyways, I talked about it there. It was like a $20 purchase on my end. I spent $25 to get it graded and it was a very, very rare coin. I put it up on eBay. It sat for a long time, but then somebody paid $350 for it. So that was a great return. And I think that just having the confidence of a very hard to find and not actively super collected coin being approved, it's, I think it's the only one that's been graded by PCGS as far as I could tell,
Awesome.
because there wasn't a page for it. Somebody wanted to pay the premium to have that instead of purchasing it from, the other eBay listings were like, you're buying it from Russia. So there's less of a guarantee. I think that like having often on the rare stuff, having the guarantee there. And I think our last place to go would be, is it worth it to grade coins from the 2 perspectives? And I think one, just a rare old coin, a really nice looking Morgan dollar that might be mint state 65. It's probably your answer will be look at the math. And then also kind of getting into the crackout game where you can probably make a lot of money. There's also a lot of ways to lose and it's probably its own video. But what do you think about those 2 ways or 2 areas of when is it worth it to grade coins? Yeah.
So for me, back when I was back when I had a goal to send out 100 coins a week to the graders, the math for me was if I thought I knew that I could make $50 or more just by having it in the holder, then I would send it. And at that point, that was the game I was playing. Like I was focusing on trying to grade as many coins as possible. And that just goes into some depth there that we don't need to talk about. But for me at that time, it was $50. For me at this point in time, specifically the MS65 Morgan, there's a handful of dates, but at the same time, I'm at a place now where my thoughts are like, keep as much money in the hobby as possible. In other words, don't just, what I'm trying to say is my opinion is to not just be to try to be diligent that I'm not just giving money to the graders for the sake of giving them money. I don't, it doesn't feel good to do that over and over and over again. And so that's kind of where I am now. So it kind of, even with me, where I'm pretty much, I've got my opinion, I've got my knowledge, I've got my experience, and I'm just going, it ebbs and flows, man. I don't know if I have the audacity to put a number on it for somebody by saying like, oh, if it's worth this much, then send it. Because you also got to look at, well, okay, if an MS65 is worth grading, what does an MS64 sell for? Because I am firmly convinced right now that if you have a coin and you're looking at it like, yeah, that's a no-brainer 65. Well, I'm just telling you from experience, you can plan on a 64 to a 66 coming back. And you've got to be willing to look at what does that look like if it comes back on the low end of that, and is it still worth grading if it comes back one grade lower? Because that's the reality of this game. And people think, oh, they graded it wrong. No, they didn't. They had a different opinion than you. Grading is an art, not a science. And I'm convinced of that. It's not we're hearing a lot of, I'm off track, but we're hearing a lot of talk about computer programs grading. Like, I just don't see it happening. Like there's too many factors that come into grading a coin. IAPL is the number 1 factor. I don't know if you guys know this, but IAPL is the number 1 factor that leads to what that coin's going to grade. How's a computer program assess that? So my point is just, I would caution to just become a practitioner, develop your eye, learn the market before you start playing the grading game. And then like going back to that coin you're talking about, you knew the market. And I applaud you for that, because you knew that was a rare coin. I'm guessing you knew it was cleaned and that it was going to come back as such. And then you also had the wherewithal to put it on eBay for $800 or up to several hundred, whatever it was, knowing that there's going to come a buyer, or a buyer is going to come along who that's what they're looking for. And when they find it, they're going to be happy to have it. And I call that a win. I think that's awesome that you did that. I did that a lot early on, and it's part of what I love about the game. And then to address the next part of your question, which was the crackout game, you know, again, I've how did I word this yesterday? I was literally talking to my friend yesterday, and we were talking about just like when we get stuck in this mentality where we're cracking it out just because we believe, oh, well, it's a 68, it's not a 67, so we're going to crack it out and send it back. And if you really look at it, you're not making any more money. In fact, you're literally losing money. Even if it does come back in a 68 at that point, the gap, the spread, it's not enough. And so, you know, again, it just boils down to those individual circumstances where it's got to be a no-brainer for me at this point. You know what I mean? Because I have gotten in my own ways. I have fallen into patterns where I'm cracking out coins just to get them in 65 holders, and they came back in 64s, where it's like that extra $20 that I'm spending to have it graded again, it's not going to pay for itself when it comes back in a 65. So, you know, try to stay conscious about what you're doing, try to learn the market and stay on top of the market of the coin you're dealing in, and try to develop your eye. That's the best I can do on this subject, I think.
I think that's really wise advice, and probably a great place to close out this video. Definitely something that we'll be talking more in depth, maybe in some specific fields going forward, or just kind of keeping in the back of our mind. You know, a lot of our conversations will have, you know, more advice than exactly what the title is. And I think today was a good example of that. But thanks so much for being on today.
Absolutely, Christian. It's always a pleasure, and thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to subscribe to Treasure Town, as well as like and comment. Check out my other platforms like my website, treasuretownYT.com. Also some information if you're interested in supporting the channel. Then I also have an Instagram at TreasureTownYT, Twitter at TreasureTownYT, and Facebook Treasure Town. So maybe I'll see you on some of those other platforms, and have a great day.